So, good afternoon. So, for those of you that are looking in your program, it may appear that I do not look like the picture that's in the program. You may have noticed that. I'm the second name that's on that program, Jeffrey Beeson, and I'm one of the founders of World Café Europe. And at World Café Europe, we believe in the sharing economy. And so, actually, I have come with Pat Monroe, who is here as well. And we're sharing. I'm going to be making most of the presentation today. And she'll be leading the World Café tomorrow. But she'll also have a few words to say about tomorrow's World Café at the end of this presentation. So I'd like to talk about the collaborative economy, about an issue that's really important towards creating that social capital, and to give you an idea of what's possible. Now, we've heard a lot about all the things and the threats and the urgency about what could and can happen if we don't change. But I'd like to actually give you a sense of what is possible. Because I think that human beings, as human beings, we react particularly well to potential, to possibility, and to actually seeing that we can actually make a difference and create a new society. We live in very interesting times. And I'm not sure that we really understand the implications of those times completely. And I'd like to just give you a feeling for what is happening. So in the 20th century, analog technology. You all know about the 21st century and the digital technology that's invading and taking part in all of our lives. We've also, in the 20th century, went and exploited and have overexploited fossil fuels. We talked about that, coal, gas, oil. Moving slowly into an era of renewables, wind, solar, biomass. So we all sort of know that, but do we really understand? Do we really understand what this is, what this means? So I'm going to ask you to now make a decision. So you have a decision to make, and it's a nice decision. You win either way. So the first decision is I can give you 1,000,000 levs right now in your pocket, right this moment, and it's yours. Okay, that's decision number one. Or you can do decision number two. I give you 1 lev today. I give you 2 levs tomorrow. I give you 4 the day after that. And it keeps doubling for a month, so 31 times. Okay, you really have to make a decision, so think which one and which option you'd like. All right, those who want the 1,000,000 levs now, please raise your hands. Aha, not too many, a few. Okay, now, all those people who want the second, of course, would have to be the rest of you. Now, let's be honest. We talked about transparency a little bit this morning. How many of you raised your hand the second time we were really doubting whether it's better to do the first option? Yeah, okay. Well, let me just explain to you what is going on. Because actually the second option is a lot better than the first option. Not just a little bit better, but a lot better. So let's look at the first 15 days of doubling the amount. At the end of 15 days, you're only at 16,000 levs. Not so great. See, you're starting to feel like you should have taken that 1,000,000, right? But notice the curve and how it's expanding upwards. And now watch the next half of the month. That's not 1,200,000 at the end of the 31st day. That's 1,200,000 if you chose option number 2. Amazing, right? And the thing is that we don't understand exponential growth. We don't understand it, we can't conceive it, but we're living it. We're living it. So what does that mean? Well, that's the computing center of the 1970s. IBM, state-of-the-art equipment. Guess what? It had less computing power than this. less. And it took up an entire room. And by the way, we're still doubling computing power every year, and we're going to continue doing that for many years still to come. So the computing and technology change is only underway, and there's many more things to come. But one thing that's not so well known is what's happening on the energy front, and the industry would lead you to believe that renewables can only be 20 to 30% of the total energy mix, and because it's too expensive. Because somehow all of these raw materials that have to go into making all of these types of photovoltaic cells, for instance, they're just not available, or they're too costly. But they're not counting with exponential growth, and by the way, exponential growth also applies to renewable energy and to photovoltaics. Maybe some of you have heard of Moore's law. That's the computing law that says that the number of components that are on a chip doubles every 18 months. And we've been watching that doubling ever since 1965. That's the exponential growth of computing. Well, pretty soon, you're going to hear about Swanson's law, that the cost of photovoltaic energy and electricity is going to be reduced by 20% for every doubling of capacity. Nobody talks about that, but it's coming. And what we're going to see is a very different type of photovoltaic cell in the future, which is going to have tremendous capacity, much greater than any of the photovoltaic cells that we have today. What does that mean? Well, there were some calculations done by MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, also by people at Google. So don't take it from me. They're saying that solar energy is going to be at the same level of cost parity as fossil fuels by the year 2020. 2020, that's only 6 years away. By the way, if you're following historically, the price of electricity generated from solar went from $60 per watt in 1976 to 66 cents per watt in 2013. And the cost keeps going down. But the most exciting part of this is that in the year 2030, solar will be much cheaper than the cheapest fossil fuel. Much cheaper than coal today, by a third less, if it continues along this progression. Projections of those costs, if they really do come about, and there's no real reason to doubt that they will, means that our world is going to be a renewable world, not 20 to 30% that industry people would be telling you, but probably 80% by the year 2030. So, why am I telling you all of this? Because I believe that this is the background in which we are working in. These things are going to happen, but the kind of society that we have, the kind of society that we want to create is not given. Is not given. But it's possible. There's a bunch of things that will and could occur. So we have essentially information that is almost free. How many of you would have believed me if I had told you 25 years ago that we would have 3 billion people connected to the internet exchanging information at little or no cost with each other? Probably not very many of you. But we also are going to have free energy if this solar panel revolution happens, which there's no reason not to believe it won't. What does that mean? Can you imagine what that might mean? I don't think we really have begun to understand what that means. I haven't talked about manufacturing. It would take me far too far away, but there was a comment in the audience about robotics. Also, manufactured goods and their costs are going to go way down. So we're going to have a society where, as opposed to the 20th century paradigm where scarcity was the norm, that abundance will be the norm. And I don't think we really understand the implications of that, what that means. First of all, the capitalist system as we know it is going to change. We had buyers and sellers before. Now we're going to have what is known in English anyway, the word is called a prosumer. Everyone is going to be able to produce as well as consume. you're going to be able to produce your own energy in your own home and sell it into others who need it. And that is going to make a very big difference in the economic equation for everyone involved. We're going to move from proprietary rights to open source. We've already seen it in the IT world, where things like Linus basically are being done by a cooperative of collaborative people working together. That's going to continue in many other spheres. Who would have thought that the encyclopedias of this world would be replaced by Wikipedia, by a multiple series of people actually making contributions to the knowledge that's in this world? Who would have thought that just a few years ago? And that's going to continue across all different spectrums. I think one of the more exciting ones is in the creative arts, where a lot of theater and so forth is being written by multiple authors as opposed to single authors. And the whole copyleft movement, as opposed to copyright movement, is taking on a larger role. This one I think is particularly interesting. We're going to move from a world of ownership to more of a world of access. And everybody's talking about the sharing economy, but this is really true. I don't know if you have car sharing here in Bulgaria. It's something that's pretty new in most of the Western European countries, but it's starting to pick up really quickly. And in the streets of Munich, where I live, we're seeing more and more car sharing all the time. That means you don't need to own a car. You can share it. And I think there was discussion about degrowth here, about reduction in production. Do you know what the implications are of sharing cars? This is statistics that come right from the automobile manufacturers. Every single car that is shared means 22 cars less need to be produced. Because the behavior of someone who starts to share a car is never to buy a car again. 80% of people who go into car sharing don't buy cars. And so therefore, the number of cars that need to be produced goes down dramatically. And this is an ongoing trend. Will continue as car sharing becomes more the norm, more the mainstream, as opposed to the exception. And then finally, we talked about, and we had the presentation from the bank about markets. One of the biggest revolutions that's possible, but because of what is happening, is that we're moving from markets to networks. Why is that happening? Because think about the previous energy regime. In order to get energy out of the ground, you have to have these pipelines, incredible capital investment, and you have to dig incredibly deep into the ground. You have to be able to pull that oil out. You need an incredible infrastructure of ships to transport that across the world, and then and trucks to get it to the distribution points where they can then be put into your car. That's about to change. All of a sudden, you're going to have electricity, electric cars being powered by sun that hits on your roof. And so these incredibly vertically organized corporations will be replaced by lateral networks of people cooperating across the economic spectrum. That is going to be an amazing change, and I think we're not talking about a change in capitalism, we're talking about a new economic form of organization. I like to call it collaboratism, but I know that sometimes that word isn't one of the words that's most widely used either in the English-speaking world or in other parts, and sometimes even has a negative connotation. But I think that it's the power of really working together and working and making things happen together. However, having said that, there is no guarantee that the world of tomorrow will be one of collaboration. Those technologies may come to pass, but how are they going to be actually used? And this is where it becomes really important that we, for ourselves, decide what kind of society we want. Because there are a lot of powers out there that want or live in the 20th century paradigm. They don't understand what is coming. And people react towards the new, a lot of times defensively. And so in Hungary, we had the protest against the internet tax. There'll be other governments, and there are governments who are trying to stop free access to the internet. This won't be the first time and there'll be some that are more successful than others. And so governments who are not used to this new paradigm will try to stop it, and so will companies. Right now in the United States, there's a major fight towards, which is called internet neutrality. And internet neutrality has to do with, is there going to be equal access to the internet, or are companies that give you access to the internet going to charge different rates for different types of access, thereby automatically shifting the nature of the internet? These are fights that are incredibly important to the future of tomorrow. And the only way that we can assure that that future that we want actually comes about is through our active involvement. Because this future requires openness. Without openness, the control mechanisms that have been put in place in the 20th century, which, by the way, for very good reason, will continue to operate and will continue to be the ones that dominate our lives in society. The more open we can be and the more open access we can have, the more likely we are able to create that new society. Also requires transparency. What is going on, where, that everyone can see it. And it requires, my Bulgarian's not the greatest. It requires the active citizen participation, which is really, I think, not to be underestimated. Without it, we will be put in the same boxes of control, command and control, top-down types of social institutions that we have come to know in the 20th century. And with that, real democracy is necessary. Not fake democracy. And by the way, being an American citizen, I can talk about the birth of democracy in the United States, which is not doing so well today. That model of democracy was created in the 18th century when it was a real revolution, and it was really an incredible step forward. But now having representatives to represent you for your own interests is a thing of the past. Real democracy means you being active and taking a part in the world around you. That's not going to be enough, though, the internet. And I want to caution you that the internet's not the solution to everything, because we all know that communication doesn't happen only through words. It happens in a very different way. The percentages we can argue about, but I think that everybody agrees that most communication actually happens non-verbally, and that non-verbal communication happens in many ways. And so we need to find ways in which it's not only just words, but it's also ways in which we can get together, and local. I love the presentation on community because local solutions are ultimately the only solutions. We need to make things happen on the ground where we are. So I now get to basically talk a little bit about the World Café. And we see the World Café not as a method, not as a tool, not as, let's just do a World Café. We see it as a way in which people can gather and create the kind of social capital and the way of, not yet, video, not yet. Okay. Well, he's playing the video ahead of cue. Well, let's watch it, and I'll talk about it later. Okay, I asked him to do it after I explained the World Café, but I guess that didn't translate. Okay. I'll just talk about the World Café. The World Café is a very simple process. It's based on the dialogue research that was done at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Then it was picked up by Juanita Brown and David Isaacs in California, who had been present at some of those discussions on dialogue. And it's beautifully simple. It's based on tables of 4, and the magic number of 4 is really important. We know about human dynamics, and you know it too if you've ever been at a dinner table with 10 people. Are you able to talk to all 10 people at the table? Probably not. As a matter of fact, we know that after 6 people, groups start to fragment naturally. 3 to 4, 2s, whatever. But what we want to do is do things together, and the magic number 4 is the best number because people can't hide, people participate, even the most introverted people participate, and it holds together. They all talk about the same topic at the same time. World Café uses that power of 4 tables, all of 4, all talking about the same topic, so that we can have as many people as we want. We can have every one of you in this room. We can have much bigger ones if we want to. 200, 300, 400 people all together, coming together to talk about things that are important to them, but that's important. Issues that matter. Otherwise, what holds us together? But we in our community can do that. And then the other magic of the World Café is that we change tables. And now I want you to just picture what happens when we change tables. The very first round, when you're in the first table, you hear 3 other points of view, plus your own. So that's 4 points of view. You change tables, you're sitting with 3 other people. They also came from 3 other tables. They also represent 4 different points of view. You now have 16 points of view represented at the next table. Change again. Different people, theoretically, 64 different perceptions at the table after only 2 table changes. Change again. After 3 table changes, 256 perspectives at your table, exponential growth. We talked about that earlier. That's what happens at World Café. So what happens after only 3 table changes in a World Café? You feel like you've talked to everybody in the room, even though you've only talked to 12 people. And if you do it well, you can get incredible results. You can get, it's not just about dialogue, which of course is the principal part, but it's also about moving the community forward. And we can make, and have had the experiences at World Café Europe, of bringing 200, 300 people together to make decisions in a community, about the community and what matters to them. And to know, and you can imagine, if we have 200 people together to all decide one thing, how much power is behind that. So now, could we have the video? This is just to give you a feeling for what a World Café feels like and looks like. So that's collective intelligence for you. And just to end our talk, I'm going to ask Pat to come up and talk about tomorrow's World Café.